This is the regular meeting of the Kaneland Board of Education. We'd like to inform all board meeting attendees that this meeting is being live streamed and archived for access at any time by our community members on the internet within 24 to 48 hours of the meeting's conclusion. This meeting is open to the public in accordance with guidance issued by the Office of the Governor of Illinois, the Illinois Department of Public Health, and the Illinois State Board of Education. Individuals are required to wear an approved face covering properly at all times over their nose and mouth while in the building, including during the meeting, and if you speak at the microphone. If we look out and we see that there are a lot of people not wearing masks, we'll take a quick break and we'll let everyone reset. And if that doesn't take care of it, we will adjourn the meeting and reconvene virtually at a later date. So if we could, we will stand for the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And a roll call whenever you're ready, please.
Mrs. Witt.
Here.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Here.
Mrs. Junk.
Here.
Mr. Carey.
Here.
Dr. Lawler.
Here.
Mr. Mankivsky.
Here.
Mrs. Simmons.
Here.
With 7 members present, we have a quorum. Would any board members like to move anything from the consent agenda to new business? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on with the approval of the agenda. The approval of the agenda tonight is as presented, correct?
Correct, yes.
So entertaining a motion that we approve the agenda as presented tonight.
So moved.
Second.
And a roll call, please.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye. Motion carries 7-0. We'll move on now to the board and superintendent salutes, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Lee.
Yes, thank you. For our first salute tonight, I'd like Dr. Adkins, Director of HR, to please come to the microphone and introduce one of our new teachers from the high school.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Layden. So as we met at the last board meeting, we introduced several of our new high school staff. We have yet another new high school staff member who is joining us today. This is Jessica Bloomquist. She is going to share a little bit about what she does and just introduce herself to you. So thank you, Jessica.
Hello, I'm Jessica Bloomquist. I am one of the instructional coaches at the high school, and I'm very happy to be here with Kaneland School District. Before this, I was an English teacher by trade. Most recently, I worked at Newark High School, and before that, I was in the Quad Cities. So I've kind of been following my husband's job around. So I'm very pleased to be here. I've really had a great experience so far, and I look forward to meeting you all individually soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. And then we will have another school at our next meeting, and we'll continue on that way until we've brought all of our new staff by to meet you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Atkins. And welcome, Jessica. Our next salute, October is Principal Appreciation Month and Principal Appreciation Week. This year is October 24th through the 30th. And so with that said, I would like to share some highlights and share a little bit from the state proclamation from the governor. The first year that the Principal Appreciation was recommended and founded was in 1990. So we are over 32 years now with the following groups: the National Association of Secondary School Principals, the National Association of Elementary School Principals, and the American Federation of School Administrators, recognizing October as National Principals Month. One of the things I would like to share, especially from the proclamation, is the proclamation is fairly standard from year to year, but the one highlight that I would like to share and showcase is the whereas that it talks about the principals being the leaders and facing numerous challenges. As we all know, all of the challenges that we faced over the last 19 months, and it specifically cites school principals and learning leaders that have faced unprecedented challenges related to COVID-19 during the 2019-2020 and the 2020-21 school years and worked tirelessly to provide uninterrupted learning during an ongoing pandemic. And so just as a reminder, last school year, during the summer, we were getting ready to start a school year in a hybrid model. And if you'll recall, towards the end of the summer, our state superintendent required a remote learning option. So we had to shift and adjust staffing and student schedules for a remote option. And then November, December, we went to full remote adaptive pause. And then in March, April, coming out of spring break, we went to full in-person for grades K through 8, and then high school remained the same. And then this year, as we started the school year, back to some of our normal activities, some of our normal schedules, but still in a year that's quite challenging. And one of the things I've been most proud about of our principal group is their leadership and direction for their staff throughout. Because last year's school year, when that school year started, there were only 10% of students in the state of Illinois that started in person. And so I was proud at that time, and I'm still proud, but proud that out of those 10%, our Kaneland students were in school during that entire time last year, other than the adaptive pause that was in December, right, going into the holiday season. So with that, I'm extremely proud and appreciative of our principals. So if you would, please join me. I wish I were here last meeting when they were all here to present, but unfortunately I couldn't be here. But I do like to take a second, and if you would please join me in appreciation for our principals and their hard work. So congratulations to our principals. And we are delivering lunch to all of them this week, so we all have been assigned a principal, and we're going to be delivering lunch to them, get out into their buildings, see their staff, and see their students also. Our last piece, our last salute is also a salute/recognition. Under board and superintendent reports, usually we give an update on various topics, and one of those is typically after the Kaneland Foundation meets. But tonight, instead of me giving the update, I would also like to let this time serve as an introduction to Rebecca Greenlee, who is our new executive director of the Kaneland Foundation. So I thought introducing Becky or Rebecca, let her share a little bit about the foundation, introduce herself. Thought it would be better coming from first person rather than second person. So with that, welcome, Becky.
Hello, everyone. So I go by Becky unless I'm in trouble by my mom. So Rebecca is you don't need to use that name. But I came to the school district back in July, so I've been here for 4 months now. I have about 20 years in the nonprofit world, anywhere from writing grants to administering grants to managing marketing communications team. So I've done a myriad of things in the nonprofit world, setting me up to lead this organization. Since coming on, we've run the golf outing so far, which was highly successful. We raised over $23,000 this year and hope to only continue to raise that over the following years. We're instituting some other fundraisers in 2022 and also a CRM database that will help track our alumni and our donors from this point on in a more streamlined manner. We are also hopefully going to be adding to our board in the next year or two to improve our growth and our outreach to the community, as well as letting people know that we are here and we are an arm of the school district to fill in some of the gaps that we have in our financials where the state and federal funds don't help out the teachers. So that's why we're here, and to help out with the classrooms. So do you guys have any questions for me? No? All right. Well, thank you. That's who I am. Nice to meet you all. I hope to meet you in person as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for coming out, Becky. And President Witt, that's the last of our salutes.
Okay. Dr. Coops, anything?
Well, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, this is the first opportunity for public comment. We have 2 opportunities for public comment, this one, and then there's another one at the end of the meeting. The board values public input to inform our decision-making and to provide information and insight into what is happening throughout the district. Board meetings are held to conduct the business of the Board of Education and are required by law to take place in public. However, they are not public forums. We use the public comment section as an opportunity to listen to our stakeholders. For that reason, the board does not enter into a debate or respond to questions spontaneously or without proper investigation and deliberation. In most cases, concerns or questions regarding follow-up will be referred to the superintendent. If you choose to speak publicly, we ask that you do so at the microphone. State your name and the village of residence or your association with our district for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less so that all who wish to speak may have that opportunity. Public comment is a maximum of 30 minutes with a 20-minute total length of time for any one subject. You are encouraged to seek a private appointment to discuss matters concerning individual students or staff members. While public education can be an emotional issue, and understandably so, the board strives to maintain a certain level of decorum at the meeting. Those who speak are expected to maintain a tone of courtesy and civility. And the first speaker I have on the list is Terry, I hope I pronounce things right. If I don't, please correct me, Swagel or Sweigel? Okay.
My name is Terry Sweigel.
Yes.
I live in Dixon, Illinois. I am here to tell everyone one of the reasons why the school board is going into closed session later tonight. You have invited my sister, Kim Ecker, to the closed session. Kim has been suspended from her position as a para at this very school, Harder Middle School. You have invited her to make her case as to why she will not comply with the vaccine mandate. Her religious exemption should be honored, and she should be allowed to work within the district. I don't know how many other individuals have submitted a religious exemption in this district, but what has happened to my sister is illegal, unethical, and immoral. As a board member, if you think you have to follow the mandates of the governor or take advice from the school attorney, and that you have no other choice, yes, you do have another choice. Please take a stand and do the right thing. What about employees that have the COVID virus or have a natural immunity and don't need the vaccine? These employees should not be terminated just because they don't get the vaccine. My purpose is not to argue this case because I am not an attorney, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a judge. I am just one person that sees what is going on in our country, and it makes me sick. As for my sister, she is a military veteran who proudly served our country and defended the freedoms that we each received from God. So when you hear word that my sister was being improper, deficient, unsatisfactory, and in violation of the Executive Order 21-22, make sure you know why. She will not take the vaccine, and she will not provide the school with her bodily fluids for testing at any time. This mandate is not a law. This is not legal. This is unconstitutional. I am so proud of my sister, Kim Ecker, for setting an example and standing up for what she believes in. She just wanted to have a choice and continue to do her job. I thank you for listening to me.
Thank you for your comments. The next speaker is Michelle, and again, if I mispronounce it, please let me know. Damadeo? Damadeo. Oh, it was one or the other, I knew. I chose the wrong one, sorry.
Hello, my name is Michelle Damadeo. I'm a citizen of Sugar Grove, and I am also here representing the public library, of which I am a trustee. We are preparing for our 2022-2025 strategic plans, and we need the help of the citizens and the district members, as well as the school, because the library is super important to the school as well. We have formed a survey for everyone to take, just a couple minute survey, and it'll give us an idea of what citizens are looking for in the library, and we welcome positive or negative comments. We want to hear what everyone would like to see our library become. So I want to take a moment to let you know that you can visit the survey at sgpl.org. You can also participate in our focus groups. which are either online or in person at the library or other locations. You can also find that on the website. And we will soon be looking for some new board members as well. So if anybody would like to join the Sugar Grove Public Library Board, we welcome that. And I want to thank you so much for letting me speak. Happy Halloween.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. That is the last of the people who are signed up to speak in public comment. There's still some time. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Okay. There is another opportunity at the end of the meeting. So we'll move on now. Tonight's consent agenda contains the following action items: the approval of accounts payable and payroll for October 2021, the approval of minutes of the October 13th, 2021 regular meeting, the approval of resignations, terminations, and employment of staff, the approval of the III conference attendance and expenses, the approval of school improvement plans, the approval of Kaneland High School course book for 2022-23 on second reading, and the following informational items: the student suspension data report and the Freedom of Information Act or FOIA requests report. So I'm entertaining a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second? Oh, Meg seconded. And roll call when you're ready, please.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye. Motion carries 7-0. Now we're in new business, and the first item is the approval of the 2021 tentative tax levy.
Yes, thank you. J1, the approval of the tentative tax levy, as you know, essentially kicks off the tax levy season that leads from now through December. And Dr. Fuchs will do a much better job walking you through the slides. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Fuchs so you can walk us through it and see what questions we might have.
Great, thank you very much, I appreciate it. So on your, or in your board packet, the first couple pages are the narrative. If you'd like to read through the narrative, you can. What I will do tonight is go through the slideshow and highlight anything that I think is important. I am cognizant of the fact that we do have 3 new board members who may not have seen the levy presentation previously, but we also have 4 experienced board members who have. So it'll be a little bit extra, but not too much. So first of all, the 2021 tax levy will provide funding for the 22-23 school year. So as Dr. Layden mentioned, this kicks off our planning for next school year already. And in a few minutes, you will see, oops, it was working. Hang on one second. There it goes. Okay. Our agenda for tonight then is to talk about general information to the tax levy, the process, what data, assumptions, and calculations will be used, and then the tax levy calendar. The tax levy is school code, so everything we do, we have to follow school code in order to make sure that the school district receives this portion of our revenue. Generally speaking, the tax levy is the amount of dollars in each operating fund that we will ask for to pay for our bills for next school year. The board must adopt the levy no later than the last Tuesday in December. However, we'll do it at the December board meeting on December 13th, unless if the weather prevents us. Our tax levy is our largest source of revenue in the district. It is also the most stable and reliable source. So as many of you have heard me say once or twice, I am proud to live in the Kaneland School District where we support the education of our children. If you live in districts near us, not all of them are able to say that, in the sense that they depend on the state and federal government for a lot more of their revenue than we do. And for those districts around us that have to depend on the state, it's been a rocky ride for quite some time. So again, I feel very fortunate that our revenue, the major source of it, comes from our local property taxes. It is a source of revenue, again, that is very stable and reliable. Additionally, that money arrives early. Our fiscal year is July 1 to June 30th. We get our first tax payment in the latter part of June and our second one in September, and then we use those payments to last us throughout the majority of the fiscal year. We do get some other monies, but again, this is our largest one. This tax levy that we're talking about tonight will pay for programs, services, operating costs, salaries, and other expenditures for the 22-23 school year. I've got a pie chart for you so that you can see the blue is your tax levy, so about 75% of your revenue. Your red is other local money. That might be your student fees, your athletic fees, your lunch fees, things like that. Your state funding is about 18%, and your federal funding is about 2% of your total budget. So when we talk about the tax levy, we are in a tax cap county, and I'll go through that in just a moment, but the levy depends on our EAV. That's the first acronym that you'll hear me say tonight, the Equalized Assessed Value. The EAV is basically the total value of all properties that are within the Kaneland School District boundaries. Again, it's the total property value of all properties in the Kaneland District boundaries. When we do this tax levy tonight and even in December, everything that we do is based on estimates. We won't know the final answer for sure until March or April. I've gathered the estimates that we'll be using from our local county assessors, and I've incorporated them into the tax levy presentation. We are going to estimate the EAV, the total EAV will grow just under 5%, somewhere around 4.75. Last year it was 5.94, and the year before 6.3. And then the existing EAV, that's without the new property, should be about 3.8%. If it grows, which we anticipate that it will be about the 7th year in a row where we've had growth in our EAV, meaning all of our properties, because we live in the Kaneland School District, have increased in value over the past 7 years. This EAV that I talk about, the property values, is important because it's used to determine how much money each local government will receive. The money that you receive from the tax levy is called the tax extension. The levy is what we ask for, the extension is what we get. And I've put the formula down there on the third bullet there, but we're also going to go through that. That's the first example. So some of you may be interested to know what kind of properties make up the total EAV in Kaneland. And you'll see from the pie chart here, approximately 79% is residential. That does put a lot of burden on the local homeowner, because a lot of districts have a lot more commercial and industrial and other types. Kaneland is still primarily made up of residents and residential. Our next largest is 11%, and that's for farm. The next one would be 7%, and that's the commercial. And then the other ones are smaller than that. This next table shows you the EAV and the history. So this gives you a perspective of where have we been and where might we be headed. You can see that there were some years when EAV declined. Those would be the negatives. and then other years for the past 7 or so where it has grown. The smallest number that we had was in 2012, where it went down over 7%. And the highest year that we've had so far is where it grew in 2017 by 7.25%. So that's basically your range at this point. In addition to EAV, we also measure new construction. New construction is things that are coming onto the tax rolls. For example, did your neighbors add a garage or make an improvement in their home? Is there a new house sitting next to you? Is there a new business? All of those are considered to be new construction. The first year that new construction comes onto the tax rolls, that property is the value of that property is outside of the tax cap. And the district is able to get the full value, use the full value towards its levy. We do that through the tax levy formula, through the math. We will, and I'll show you where it's at in just a moment, but we're going to subtract the whole value of the new construction from the denominator in our fraction, and that will increase the limiting rate that we are limited by. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. This line graph shows you what kind of new construction we've had in the district since 2011. And you can see it goes up and down. It grew for a while, then it went down a little, and then up, and now it's this year, or in 2020, we had about 9.5 million. In a few seconds, when you see the formula, based on my conversation with the assessors, we're expecting about 9.2 million. Again, let me remind you, these are estimates because we won't know exactly what's going to happen until March or April. As I mentioned earlier, we are under what's called the tax cap. The official name of that law is Property Tax Extension Limitation Law, PTEL. PTEL is designed to limit the increases for governments. It is not designed to limit the increases for property tax payers. So it limits this governmental body from taxing too much, but an individual's property tax, it doesn't limit that, and it doesn't limit it especially if it increases in value. So we often call PTEL the tax cap, and we are, and actually let me go ahead and flip the slide here. We are limited to either 5% or the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, whichever is less. So when we do our tax levy, we're going to ask for dollars. Each year we're limited by the amount of dollars we can ask for by either 5% or CPI, whichever is less. And so we've not had a 5% since the tax cap has been put into place. That may change in the future, but for right now, that's the case. Again, I've talked about the fact that it does not apply to new construction, and I just mentioned about the 5%. So the counties in yellow here are all tax cap counties, and you'll notice that they hover around populated areas. Kaneland has been a tax cap county, Kane County, since 1991. So all of the school districts, all of the governmental units in Kane County, all are under PTEL or the tax cap.
Dr. Fuchs,
Yes.
what determines whether or not you're a tax cap county?
It was voted in back at the time, in 1991. It has to be voted in when the law went into effect.
Thank you.
So this is the Consumer Price Index. So we've talked a little bit about some of the variables that are going to go into this formula that we're going to use. First, we talked about EAV, the total property value. Then we talked about the new construction. That's another piece of the puzzle. And now we're talking about a third element called the CPI, or Consumer Price Index. The CPI is an indicator of inflation, how much our price is going up on an annual basis. My purpose for this table is to show you what CPI year is used for what levy, and then what year does it fund programs. Because I just think that that's an important concept of the way that this law and formula was set up. Let me walk you through that for just a moment. Tonight, or in December, when you approve the final levy, December of 2021, we will use the 2020 CPI of 1.4%, and that will fund our 22-23 school year. So in January of 22, we will learn what the CPI is, and that will fund our 23-24 school year. So it's pretty far in arrears is what I would call it. The average CPI for the last 8 years is about 1.6%. 1.6, it's been pretty low. Our highest there is 2.3%. Our lowest was 0.1 in 2009, but that's not on here. Oops. Did I miss one?
Makes me shudder just to remember
What's that?
Makes me shudder just to remember that.
Oh, you and me both. That was a rough time. So this chart here shows us what happens with the EAV change, the CPI, and the tax rate. The triangle on the left says, given your CPI. So again, the CPI is given. We don't get to pick it. The government tells us what we're going to use. Given that CPI, if your existing EAV stays the same, then your tax rate would stay the same. But right now, we are in an EAV environment on the right-hand side where existing EAV is going up. The values of our properties are going up. And what that means is that the tax rate will actually decrease. And you'll see that in my example. But please know, just because a tax rate decreases does not mean that you'll pay less for your property taxes, because all property homeowners in Kaneland share that burden of the property tax payment or the levy to the school district, to the park district, to the other governmental units. This table is a comprehensive chart for you. It shows you your tax year, your CPI, EAV, new property. I'll talk a little bit more about limiting rate in just a moment. The capped extension, that's how much you're limited to actually receive. Each year then, the district gets a little bit more money. Please know that this, generally speaking, has been one of our only sources of additional revenue. Typically, our state revenue and our federal revenue have remained approximately the same. Now, it is unusual during COVID that we received several ESSER grants. That's the first time we've received some of that kind of money in a long time. And it was for, or it is for a fairly specific purpose, which is to help us get through the pandemic. But on a regular year, on an annual basis, the tax levy is our only source of gaining new revenue. That new revenue typically will be used to pay for salary and benefit increases of all of our people. And as an educational institution, that is our business, is we have lots of employees to help educate the children.
Dr. Fuchs? Let's look at year 2020. The CPI was 2.3%, but the extension or increase was 3.19.
Yep.
The difference being?
New property, new construction. Remember those three variables? Existing, new, and CPI. The difference there is, the difference is between the existing value and new construction.
Okay, so that's why the two don't match.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So when I sit down to prepare for this presentation, this is the process that I use to go and try to figure out how much do we get to ask for or levy for this year. The first thing I do is I take the prior year aggregate extension. That's how much money we received. I apply the CPI. I estimate the EAV and new construction given the information I've received from the assessors. We determine the limiting rate. From that, I can estimate how much we're going to get and distribute that into our funds. 5 steps. So this is the formula from the tax cap law that we use to do all of that. It's called the limiting tax rate. Once we get the actual amounts, the district cannot receive any more money through the extension than what the limiting tax rate allows. And you'll see in this limiting tax rate formula, we're using those variables that I talked about. The prior year extension, remember the extension is what you get, so we take a look and say, what did we get last year? We'll multiply that by 1 plus the lesser of either 5% or CPI, and we'll divide that by your total estimated EAV and subtract out the value of the new construction. By subtracting out that new construction, that's how we get a little bit higher rate, and we're able to take advantage of that property the first time it comes on the tax rolls. Numbers, let's take a look at the notes. We know number 1. Number 2, I just talked about. New property is outside of the tax cap. Number 3, I haven't talked about. Debt service payments are also outside of the tax cap. In a few minutes, you're going to see me divide our tax rate into 2 parts. It's going to be the operating tax rate and the debt service tax rate, the bond and interest. The bond and interest is comprised of the portion that our voters have approved referendums for building constructions and projects. So we're still paying off the debt on that. Think of those as mortgages. They're usually 20 years, and you pay a little bit each year, and you bring down your debt. We're not talking about that tonight. That's outside of the levy. Tonight, we're talking about the operating extension. So I'll keep going. We talked about this a little bit, but let me review. These are the 3 pieces of data that I will use that I've used in the formula. The CPI, 1.4%. The estimated EAV change of 3.8%. And then the estimated 2021 new construction of 9.2 million. Again, those come from our tax assessors. So I used that formula, I plugged in the numbers, and it gives me the limiting tax rate of 5.2746. From that, you multiply your estimated EAV, and it comes out to 50,513,028. So that's the amount of money that we can estimate that we're going to receive from this tax levy. So at this point in time then, we believe or estimate that we'll receive about 2.4% more, or approximately 1.2 million from this tax levy than last year's extension. Typically, in order to balance revenues and expenditures, you want to limit your expenditures in 22-23 by the amount of that 1.2 million. Otherwise, you'll have to find places to cut. We won't know all of those amounts until summer of 2022, but this is really the kickoff to the financial season. You're going to hear from me and see me a lot in the next couple weeks and months, because we have to hit it hard and start planning for 22-23, because by the time July gets here, it's too late to do anything. All of the decisions have been made. So what I do also is I want to make sure you know where we're at in comparison to these other districts. First of all, the Board of Education, I would say maybe 5 to 7 years ago, have agreed, actually it was 2017, agreed on the 8 other school districts in our area that we would compare to, and these are those tax rates of those local districts. You can see from this chart that DeKalb has the highest, then Yorkville, then Kaneland, all the way down to the lowest, which is Huntley. And so we compare ourselves to DeKalb, Yorkville, Burlington Central, Batavia, Sycamore, Geneva, St. Charles, and Huntley. And you can see that we have the 3rd highest tax rate. The good news is we're not the highest. It's the best I can do. So this, again, is another chart showing EAV per pupil. So this says your total property value, remember that's EAV, and divide it by the number of pupils that you have in your district. In that example, we rank 4th highest. First Geneva, St. Charles, Batavia, then Kaneland. DeKalb, of course, is the lowest then. Yorkville and Huntley are at the bottom there as well. This is our operating expenditures per pupil. So this is how efficient do we use our money, our operating costs per student, per pupil. And in this example, the highest is at the bottom, the lowest is at the top. So we're 4th highest. That aligns with which our position is. Let me go back for a second. Almost aligns to our position for the tax rate. And it correlates directly to the EAV per pupil. So the bottom line, our impact on the tax rate. Again, I mentioned that we've got 2 portions. You've got the operating rate, the bond and interest rate, and then the total tax rate. And what I did on this chart is I said, what did we have last year? What are we expecting this year? What's the change? And you can see that our total tax rate is going to be somewhere around 6.56. Remember, I'm using estimates. We won't know exactly until March or April when it's finalized by the county. These are some.
Put $6, can you go back a slide, please?
Sure.
Total tax rate is $6.56, doesn't make sense. Put it in context for me, which is per $100 or per what?
Yep. So actually, let me use the next slide to put it into context, okay?
Thank you.
Yep. So on the left-hand side there, these are the potential assessed values of your homes. So say, for example, if your home is worth $300,000, in Illinois, for the purposes of property taxes, we use 1/3 of that value, which gives you $100,000. Last year's property tax bill would have been about $67.60, and this is only the portion for the school district. With the $6.56, it makes it about $6,560. So it's the $6.56 represents about $100 to the 1,000 there of your EAV. It shows a decrease, but please remember, we talked about this, property values are increasing, so chances are good your tax bill is not going to go down, but it's going to go up. Every property will increase at a different rate, so I cannot tell you exactly what your property is going to be, but on this chart what I did is a 5% assumption, so it could be higher, it could be lower, but this shows if your home value increased by 5%, that would make it $315,000, and so that says that in 2021, your approximate increase would be $128. It just gives you a sense of where it's at depending on each individual property. Does that help put that into context at 656?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then this is our calendar so that you know where we're headed. And then I got to show you one other chart and we'll do that. So tonight you'll approve the tentative. I'll give you an update at the end of November if anything has changed. And then in December, I'll advertise according to the school code. The 13th, President, with the board needs to give me consensus if you want to have a levy hearing. Typically, well, first of all, the levy hearing is required if you levy for 5% or more than last year's extension. In a minute, I'll show you, but we're just under 5%. We're at 4.99%. And so a levy hearing is not required. However, previous boards of education at Kaneland have always honored the levy hearing in the event that any of our stakeholders, taxpayers, want to come and share their viewpoints. So we can do that in a second. You would approve the final levy in December. I'll file it the next day. March or April, we'll get our final numbers. May and June, county sends out the tax bills, and then June and July, we'll start collecting. Let me show you one other paper then that I want to talk about. It's in your packet, and it's right after the narrative. And this one shows you how I have it distributed. And unfortunately, I don't have a copy of it for the slides. But this, the operational funds are on the left-hand side of this chart, starting with ed, O&M, transportation, working cash. And what it does, if you follow it across to the second column to the right, it will tell you how much of the extension, how much of that $50 million will we be putting into the levy. And then you'll see there, where is it? Oh, it's not on this one. But we've got 4.99% listed for our increase. So we're good for that. I think that's at the top. So I guess at this point, what I would say is, what questions does the board have? And then I just need to know if you indeed want to have a levy hearing so I can prepare for that.
Okay, maybe we could get the levy hearing thing out of the way. Does everybody, can you just thumbs up or thumbs down to yes, have a, okay, it's unanimous, I think. That we all
Not a
wanna have the
problem.
hearing.
Yep. And then if there are any questions to any of the calculations or concepts that I've used.
So I want to do a 20% increase. Why can't we?
I'm sorry, Ryan.
I want to increase the budget by 20% so we have more money. Why can't we do that? And I'm being sarcastic.
Yep.
I just,
So I believe
You
your
might want to
question.
say that's a hypothetical.
yeah, it's a hypothetical. I always ask you these same questions of, just to make sure that everybody understands. We can ask for whatever we want. Doesn't matter. I don't know why they make you go through all the hoops to come up with what we're going to ask for, but we could ask for a 20% increase, but we are limited to,
The CPI, 5% or CPI, whichever is less, plus new construction. So it's going to be around that 50 million mark that's in here.
okay.
I think
Thank you.
let me take a peek here at 50 million.
800,000.
Yeah.
So aside from the,
513.
aside from the new property, we're basically just keeping up with inflation.
That's exactly what it is.
And there's no way that we can get ahead of that number unless we're basically limited by inflation, or this year we might even get caught because they're talking about 6% inflation numbers, so.
You know what? That 6% that you're talking about, I'm very curious how that works out, because that'll be the first time that it goes over 5%. And so that'll be in December of '22 for the 23-24 school year. And that's actually when you would fall behind, because if inflation is going at 6% and you're limited at 5%, there's going to be a gap there. Right now, we can at least keep up with inflation based on this law. Interesting.
Thank you.
Anyone else have questions, comments? Okay, if not, I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education adopt the 2021 total tentative operating tax levy in the amount of $51,800,000.
So moved.
Second. And a roll call, please.
Dr. Lawler,
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky,
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons,
Aye.
Mrs. Witt,
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez,
Aye.
Mrs. Junk,
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you for that explanation, Dr. Fuchs.
Yep.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Atkins, would you mind getting that off the screen, maybe? Thank you. I can click it, but I can't do that.
Our next item of new business is the approval of an FTE for an additional early childhood staff member.
Yes, thank you. As you know, we bring various needs to the board for staffing as those needs are presented across our district. And we would like if it always came during March, during the staffing plan, and it was nice and simple, but that's not the way it falls in reality. So as we regularly monitor it and update it, we bring those needs to the board, and this is one of those instances. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Atkins, and he can share more details.
Thank you. For those of you that may not know, prior to coming to Kaneland, I was a principal at an elementary school in another district for 10 years that had an early childhood program. So I've seen firsthand the benefit and the power of intervening with some of our students and then also offering a tuition opportunity to our 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. So I'm super excited to be here tonight. There's probably a couple things in the memo that I just want to go over real quick so that you have an understanding of how this works. There's 2 components to our early childhood programming in Illinois. The first is Child Find, where we are required by law to go out and actively seek out students who need early intervention. There's a variety of ways that happens. Our staff works tirelessly with local pediatricians, organizations, interventionists to find students that are entitled to services. We go through a case study process, just like we do with a child that might need special education services. Those students, some of them end up being entitled for services, anything from walk-in speech to full academic half-day programs and an IEP. And then starting in 2016, I think, in the 16-17 school year, we began offering a tuition-based component to that program as well. So in the past, it was primarily and only students who receive special education services, but then we expanded that to include tuition-based programming as well. This current year, we have seen an increase in the number of students that we have. I think I shared in the memo that typically we shoot for 13 to 15 students per class. That's AM, PM for early childhood kids. Oh, and by the way, they don't attend on Fridays because of how many hours they need to be in school. But then this year, we're running anywhere from 15 to 19 because we do have those special education services that we have to provide. So one of the interesting things about the law is that if a student is entitled to services, the case study usually happens towards the end of their 2nd year of birth. The day they turn 3, we are obligated to provide services that day. So if a child is entitled to services, they begin the day they turn 3. So as we began to accept these students and increase these students, we also noted that we currently have 32 students in the case study pipeline. So we currently, right now, this moment, have 32 kids that we're completing comprehensive exams on, testing, et cetera, to see if they're entitled to services. In looking back over the last several years, we typically average, I believe it was 67% of those kids became entitled for services. So if we apply that to the 32 students in the pipeline now, that's another 21 students that we can conservatively expect to have become entitled to services. And so we need to add a section. What we'd like to do is add an AM/PM section, so that would be 1 FTE classroom teacher, 1 FTE for the classroom aide, because that's the standard for staffing those classrooms. And then with that comes an increase in the amount of social work minutes that these young students need. So there is a half of a social worker in there, so a 0.5 social worker for half the year. If you look at all of that, that would be 2.5 FTE, but only for half the year. So it's a $60,000 increase to the budget. And we would begin starting that program in January. And what we would do is we would, 1, include all of the kids who we currently have in the pipeline as well as then siphoning some of the students that we already are serving in those classes that are in that 15 to 19 range, pull them off to get classes to where they're supposed to be, but then also have enough sections for the remainder of the year. One of those sections, we're not sure if it would be AM or PM yet. We have to look at where the kids are geographically and some of those aspects with placement. But one of the sections would be a special education section only. The other section would be special education and tuition-based students. So we do have that burgeoning need from our special education realm, and we'd be able to also include some of those tuition-based students in that program. Questions? Yes.
Yeah. What's your anticipation as to these additional new students affecting the IDEA child count and some of this funding, special ed funding that'll go with it?
I would assume that there's reimbursements to come with that, but I don't know what those percentages of total reimbursement would be. I'd have to defer to.
But as part of this, have you, do you have a number or percentage that you anticipate will?
Let me look real quick over my shoulder if there's an actual percentage that comes with that, or if that is something that we would calculate after the fact, depending on types of services, et cetera.
Chris, Dr. Edson,
Somewhere
can you have
between,
Fran- can you have Fran
somewhere
come to the
between 6
microphone?
and 10% is what she said.
I just want to make sure everybody can hear.
Yeah, no, I totally understand.
Between how much?
Thank you, Mrs. Eggleston.
I believe somewhere between 6 and 10% for the teacher and the aide. We get reimbursement.
That will fall under IDEA, your IDEA child count, right?
Correct.
I know a commonly asked question of the board, is this a must-do or I would like to do? The IEP portion of this is a must-do. We do have to provide these students these services.
Other questions?
Thank you, Mrs. Eggleston.
Thank you, Fran.
I'm curious, for the tuition students, what proportion of that would be able to cover these salaries? I mean, what do we see in terms of the revenue coming in from those students? Can you quantify?
Dr. Fuchs will be able to answer that for you.
Yeah. The tuition is approximately $2,000 a year. This will be a half a year, so it'll be about $1,000. It's $250 a month. And it's not paid for by the students with IEPs. It's paid for by the blended students, because we're not required to do that portion of it. But we want to offer blended because it offers a rich experience for both the blended student and the student with the IEP. In terms of the portion of the salary, approximately half might be, it just depends on how many blended are in that class. I'm trying to think, Fran, if we have 13 or 15 in there, blended wise, we'd have 5 to 6? Yeah.
Okay,
So,
so a little less than 50%?
say it again.
We maintain the 70-30 split that's required
So it's
under
much
law
less
for the
than
blended program.
50% for that class. Yeah.
Correct.
For the EDK kids, extended day kindergarten, it's approximately 50% because it almost pays for itself, but the early childhood does not.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Dr. Fuchs.
Other questions? Okay,
Thank you.
if not, I'll entertain a motion that the Board of Education approve 1.5 certified and 1.0 classified FTE for additional early childhood staffing.
So moved.
Second. And a roll call, please.
Mr. Mankowski.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. That concludes new business for tonight. We'll move on now to the superintendent and board report, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Layton.
Yes, thank you. The first update is our weekly King County Health Department call. There's very little new or updated information other than the information that was shared about the pending belief that the vaccine for 5 to 11-year-olds will probably be available for those that would like to take advantage of that the first week in November. And so we don't have any information as far as where and how those shots will be available, but as we do get that information, we have shared it in the past as far as clinics, so we would do that for those families that are interested. And as far as case rates in the county, they have remained stable with a little bit of a downtick over the last month, which is good progress. And I know that about this time last year, coming right out of Halloween, is when we had our greatest increase. Right now, our county's at about 2.9%. Last year, our county was at 11.9% positivity rate that led to a remote plan for the 3 weeks. So we'll just continue to monitor that and make sure that we continue to follow our layers of mitigation and stay healthy going into the holiday season. The next note, the Facility Planning Committee generally meets 2 times per year in the fall without any actionable feedback from the committee. Rather than meet, we just shared information with them via email, which was our enrollment information, summer projects. Dr. Fuchs provided an update. The solar update is a real nice website that Dr. Fuchs pulls up and has all kinds of numbers and data. We don't have it actionable yet because it's still new and we're working our way through it, but we're hoping by later fall to be able to share some information of what we're learning. And again, a couple districts have asked us about it. People have inquired to come and look, and so it is a positive step moving forward. And then the other information that we shared, the Kaneland High School Master Facility Plan and the next steps for that, which Dr. Fuchs will share as part of the Superintendent Board report when I'm done with a couple of my reports. So she'll share an update on that. One other note, typically at the beginning of November, each school year, we send out as a district our updated emergency plans, weather plans, snow plans for the upcoming winter, so people know where to look, where to find, and how to get that information. So as we met this year for a discussion, if you recall, at the beginning of the 2019-2020 school year, 2 years ago, districts had the opportunity to apply for a waiver with the State Board of Education to use 5 remote learning days as emergency days in lieu of snow days and not tack the days onto the end of the school year. So it was interesting that year as we had that discussion, we were like, when would you ever go to full remote for 5 days? When would that ever happen? And clearly March and April that changed dramatically. And then last year with the hybrid model and the number of schools that were remote, those that were hybrid and everywhere in between, that the eligibility wasn't available for last year because people pretty much did what they had to do to keep students in session, whether it was in a hybrid model or remote. So for this year, each year, the application for districts that would like to apply to use their remote learning for 5 emergency days is due September 1st. So we did not hit that deadline for this year for consideration, but the state did have some flexibility as the year and COVID has kind of changed. But as we had a lot of discussion, one of the things that was a staple 2 years ago when we first started COVID and COVID-related learning was our goal was to get our students in front of our teachers as often as we could, get them in person as often as we could. And fortunately, we were very successful to have a full hybrid model 2 years ago and able to get that started. So our recommendation, based on a number of factors, the state superintendent encouraged in-person learning when possible. Our EC through 3rd grade students do not have one-to-one devices. If you recall, when we did have to go to the adaptive pause last year, Mr. Wolf and the IT staff did a phenomenal job finding iPads for that age group and worked hard with the KEA to have some of these discussions. And they were great to work with, willing and flexible to go with whatever plan, and we're able to have that dialogue, and we're willing to make it accessible and make it viable for our students. But as we reflected, the number of days of students with their teachers is extremely valuable, especially with some of the information you'll see from the state report card that will come out later. The value of students being with teachers, our recommendation this year, in lieu of any remote learning, number one, we missed the deadline, so there's not even 100% sure that we would be approved for it. is to use snow days for emergency days and then add the days to the end of the school year. That way, we know that when students are back in session, they will be with their teachers and have, I'm sure, remote learning. Our teachers would do a wonderful job. Our staff would do a wonderful job. But not knowing of the night before, would our younger students be able to have access? If a teacher was sick, who would sub during those days? And there's a greater chance of loss of days of instruction if we went to a full remote plan for emergency days as opposed to snow days. So I share that with you as a advance notification as we send out the emergency plan. So when our community does receive it, that's a lot of the background that went into that discussion. So wanted to see if you had any questions on that. I think for the 22-23 school year, knock on wood, if we are post-COVID, we can entertain that conversation again to be done prior to September 1st. But for now, this is our recommendation upcoming for this school year. Questions?
Not a question, but I do think we saw last year like a loss of childhood when we didn't have snow days anymore. And so I don't mind having some of those back, and that random day off is sacred.
Thank you. Anything else? The next bit of notification, thank you for that. So when you see that information, that will be coming shortly. On Thursday morning, Dr. Fuchs, President Witt, and myself, we meet with our village officials. We invite our 8 or 9 municipal leaders to a meeting annually. We share what's going on with the school district, our strategic plan, our solar field, Kaneland Connects, remote learning, just what is on the front, our engagement plan, any of those master facility, capital outlay projects. We share that, which is valuable, but way more valuable for us, I believe, is the impact or the feedback and input that they give us. They let us know what's going on in their communities. They let us know how many home starts there are. They let us know if there's any new legislation, any new restaurants. People are always interested if new restaurants are coming. And so we'll have that meeting on Thursday, and then I'll provide an update to the Board of Education on any updates that we learn that would be impactful for our school district. Also this time of year, in addition to levy season, it's also parent-teacher conference season. So Thursday, November 4th, 3rd, and then, Wednesday in the evening on the 3rd, and then all day on Thursday, we have parent-teacher conferences. Please, as communication is coming out and signups are taking place, we do have a blended model that we're going to be using. We did find, very interesting, the number, especially at the high school, the number of conference attendance that increased when it was done virtually. People were able to take 15 minutes from work. They could do it during their lunch break or other times, as opposed to having to leave work altogether or finding a babysitter and then coming into school. So we will continue that this year in a number of the schools and a number of the grade spans. So if you do have students, please be on the lookout for that information that's coming out to be able to sign up for parent-teacher conferences. This time of year is also our Illinois State Report Card season. As I shared at a previous meeting when we first learned what the release was going to be in July, it is as I shared, a 3-phase release. So I have some additional information I'll share with you and how we plan to share it with the community and provide feedback to our board. On October 29th, the report card information will be officially released. So we will share information with our community. We'll send a letter out and a link to where people can go and find that information. But unfortunately at that time, due to, if you recall back in the spring, districts had a choice to keep their state assessments during the spring or flex that time to the fall. Because of the hybrid model last year, students were in session fewer times. So many districts, rather than give up 2 or 3 or 4 days of state assessments, many districts chose the fall. So this fall release of the data is just going to be the regular school data that we receive, the financials, enrollment, a lot of the very perfunctory data. There will be very little new information, or actually be no information on student assessments. So then the next release is in December. So for Kaneland, the only new piece of information that we'll have then will be the SAT results. So the first two releases, the first one is just our regular perfunctory data. The second one will have the SAT. And then the third release in April will have all of the rest of our data from the fall testing. So other than the SAT that we took in the spring, all the rest we put to fall in abeyance to have as many days as students with their teachers last spring. So that said, the information will come out this weekend, and we will send a link to families where they can find it, and then we'll provide more information to the board, updates and trends. But the other thing that's a little frustrating, you'll see a couple notes. If you go to the report card, you look at the data, whether it's on the financials, whether it's on retention rates of teachers, academic progress, you'll see two icons. They're noted data not available. So you'll see about a third of the icons, there's no data available because of assessments that have not been taken, or in the fall, information that's not available. And then the other one, you'll see probably for the other third, is possible COVID-19 impact. So you'll see that as almost a disclaimer on about another third. So about a third of the items will be true raw data that we're able to learn and take advantage of. So I've met with Patrick and Sarah today, Dr. Mum and Mr. Raleigh, and based on the information that we're going to be able to receive, rather than having 3 presentations throughout the year, and especially as the last meeting, as there were a number of presentations that went longer, we're going to put together a plan probably for January to be able to take the information that we have from the spring assessment that we did do the SAT, and then our own internal indicators of success, and then later in April do an update on the other information that we do have. Because the last thing we want to do is take valuable board time to share the same information over and over again when it's not updated or new. Are there any questions on that? The only other item of note, I know that interests a number of people sometimes, is the summative designation. Each school receives a summative designation, and 2 years ago, all 6 of our schools were designated as commendable. And this year, based on the data that's incomplete, they're just carrying over that same designation into this school year. So again, all of our schools will be designated as commendable based on the finding, the data, the financials, teacher retention, and all of the information. Any questions on the state report card? Again, I'll share it. If you review it, as you look through it, if you have questions, please ask us questions. And then when we do come and share information, we'll have our some first semester information, our first trimester information, indicators, and some of the school report card data that we do have that's actionable at that time. And the last thing that I have is an open house also November 4th, next week on Thursday. The Fox Valley Career Center always does a wonderful open house that starts at 5:30. So if you meet in the lobby by the Fox Valley Career Center at 5:30, or if you're going to let me know if you're coming, I can always meet you in the district office and walk you down. They do a real nice job with tours. They show and highlight all of the wonderful programming that they have going on in the Career Center. That is all I have. I know Dr. Fuchs, I know you have a couple one, and then Mr. Gonzalez, I believe you have one, but Dr. Fuchs, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, I do. I have 3 tonight. So I wanted to let you know that the FAC, the Finance Advisory Committee, met last Thursday. We are meeting 4 times this year, or quarterly. And last Thursday, the 3 primary topics, I also went over the enrollment changes and updates with the FAC. That information was in your last board packet. I went over with them the 2021 budget, that was last year's, and then compared it to this year's budget and shared that information with them, and then got them to start thinking about school fees and the philosophy. We're going to talk more about that in December in hopes of bringing the board some recommendations in early January in order to get school fees approved in time for the kindergarten registration. Our next meeting is December 9th, and that's when we'll be talking about the school fees. Currently, we have 11 people on the FAC. I had a longtime person resign. He was our chair, George Castellisi. So if you know George or see George, He gave us approximately 10 to 11 years of service and did a great job. And so he did resign. And then our newest member is Carolyn Comel from Elburn. And so she joined us this past Thursday and will do a great job on that committee. She's well-known throughout the district. She was an employee and now is retired. So FAC went well on Thursday night. The next piece of information, as Dr. Layden mentioned, the high school master facility planning. We are working with E.O. Sullivan, our community engagement consultant. They revised our timeline from the original timeline just because of some of the delays, which is on us, not on them by any means. Their new timeline has from September to December to develop the messaging and to find out on the portal, to create a portal and get some feedback from our stakeholders. But a lot of the work happens between January and March, where they will do some community committees, gatherings, presentations to gather feedback on the high school master facility plan if they deem that this in fact is the right time to be doing that, which is the primary goal in this first phase, phase one, which could be pushed out a little bit after December. And the last thing I wanted to mention is last week we did get Test to Stay up and running. Yay. Last week, I believe we had about 15 students who were able to take advantage of that Test to Stay, where they would have typically been excluded from school, but rather we were able to do a By Next Now test on them following their exposure to a positive case of COVID. The Test to Stay program requires us to test those kids and staff on days 1, 3, 5, and 7 following exposure. Following that 7th day, if they continue to test negative, they're still have to watch carefully, but they're free, and during that whole time they can stay in school. Today, I believe we did 16 participants in the Test to Stay, and so it's going well. Last week when we did those tests, we did find 2 of the kids positive, and we were able to exclude them immediately to stop the spread, which is our goal. So, especially when you've got lots of clusters of people in small locations, classrooms, et cetera, it's one more mitigation strategy that we are hopeful to stop the spread so that we can get over the hump of the pandemic. So, the Test to Stay, just so that you all know, does not apply to the lunchroom. The rules say that if you are closer than 3 feet, but you do not have a mask on, like in a lunchroom, then you're not eligible for Test to Stay. Test to Stay is if you're in a classroom and you happen to be closer than 3 feet for a sustained period of 15 minutes or more, you would be eligible. Additionally, if you're on a school bus and you're less than 3 feet, but you're masked, you would be eligible. So while it doesn't capture everyone, it does capture obviously some students. The other thing is if you have a person in your household who is positive, you are automatically excluded for that 14 days because of your closeness to proximity to that positive person. Test to Stay also only applies to school-related exposures. For example, if it's an exposure on an outside club or team, that would not apply. If it's on a Kaneland team, it would, but not on an outside team. And I think that's probably the gist of it for now. But our 4 new people are doing a great job. They're working alongside our nurses and our administrators who are contact tracing, and it really helps to have an extra set of hands and adults to be working on this. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Board members?
Yeah, so you guys may recall last meeting, I volunteered to represent the board at the 2021 IASB Delegate Assembly. So they provided us this packet with the 2021 proposals. Just a reminder to review them. I guess the process is we'll be discussing them next time, coming to a consensus as to how we're going to vote as a board, and then I'll take that to the assembly. So just a reminder to do some homework, I guess.
Next meeting. Our next meeting.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll move on then to topics for future agendas. Anyone? Yeah.
I actually, I participated in the equity focus group a couple days ago, and a couple things kind of sparked in that conversation of things as school board members school board member, especially newbie, that I feel like I should know, I don't know, so I'm hoping maybe this might be something other new board members might want to know information too. The topic was more, so there's two topics, but the main focus was access to resources. Do our kids have access? Do the parents have easily accessible access to resources? And one of them that I know we've had, and I believe we still have, is the safety hotline and email. And if we could have more information about that, because I know I've seen other parents kind of talk about like some things that they would like to report, but they don't know how to. And as a board member, I don't know how to speak to that too. So we could have information about what does that safety hotline email look like. I have kind of like notes here, which I can send to you guys. How is it being used? What should a student expect or a parent should expect if they call or email? Is it even being used? Is there any data behind it? So, like I said, as a board member, I know it's out there. As a parent, I should say, I know it's out there. But as a board member, I can't speak to it. So I don't know if it would be something that other newer board members too might. And
can that be on an update?
I don't know if it would be helpful that other parents would want to hear about it too.
Okay.
So the reason I ask is the second topic will be, you'll probably ask the same question. It's more, like I said, the question in the focus group was, is this information easily accessible? Is that information out there, like, not just for me to know, but do the parents know this? So I guess there might be even, for us, I think it would be better for suited here, because we can have a conversation too, like, are we missing communication cues? Or, you know, again, the newbie, so that's why I kind of put that out there.
So what we do here is we do a thumbs up, thumbs down if we're interested in putting it on a future agenda and actually having a discussion in a meeting. So that's what I'm looking for now. Right here, so. Looks like it's 4-3, I think. So we'll put that on an agenda.
Okay.
And so and the second one just kind of follows suit. It's again, being a new member, I think information that maybe can discuss too. It also comes out of the focus group, but it also comes out of the change that we just made with pulling those two classes, Fox Valley Career out. If we could have some information about what our career-focused kids, what resources they have. Like our college kids have their counselors. I went on our website, I saw there's 2 links for like trade schools and things like that. But we've made the commitment now that we're going to pull those 2 Fox Valley career classes into Kaneland. And like Mr. Raleigh said, we have the resources for them. And as a school board member, I felt lost at the last meeting, not being able to speak to that. And so I want to be able to support that. And so hoping for some information about that. And I don't know if that might bring some more communication for some of us newbies too of, you know, is there anything that we didn't know about or more we can? And so, again.
Okay. Again, we need a thumbs up, thumbs down on this one.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
I just want a clarifying question. The access to the resources of the safety tip hotline, that's an easy one. That's where the link is, the information, how to find it, how often people have submitted things. That's an easy one.
The ad, I was going to say, like I said, I was going to add a couple more, but like, what's the criteria to when you report, or like, what's the expectation of like, I remember if you report, then you get a phone call back, you know, so there's more details than just a safety number. So I didn't know what those expectations were and what a student or a parent should expect, so.
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm bringing back the right information to the board. And then the information easily accessible, is that just general? I just want to make sure we bring back what you're looking for, so, or what the board's looking for. So is that
And I think that's a part of the conversation I'm hoping to have with the rest of the group too, of like communication-wise, what is easily accessible for parents? Like I said, I went to the website and I couldn't find it easily accessible, that part. But like the resource for trades, I clicked on that and I found it, so.
I have a question. Was it the safety hotline you couldn't find easily?
Right, yes.
On the main webpage in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a triangle.
So, and that's
Take a
good
peek
to
of it.
know, yeah, because I went to like the different boxes and looked the different
Bottom
things.
right-hand corner.
So, yeah, and I might be the only one that doesn't know that, but it might be other conversation we could have. So.
I just
But
spent
I
the
don't
whole
have an
time
answer
you're
for you for the
talking looking
communication
for
end
it.
of it, or the
Okay.
easy accessible.
Okay, so we need a thumbs up, thumbs down on the career path stuff. That's fine with me. Okay, so, yep, that one too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay.
I just wanted to congratulate the Kaneland football program. Big win there on Friday night when they had to, and congratulations on being eligible and selected for the state playoffs. And good luck against Fenwick on, is it Friday or Saturday? What?
I'm not 100% sure. It is either Friday or Saturday based
Friday.
on the host school, so
Yeah.
we'll learn that information.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you. Dr. Atkins, do you have the sign-up sheet for the public comment? There's no one listed, okay. So this is the second opportunity for public comment. Same rules apply. There's no one signed up. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on. We do have a closed session tonight. We do anticipate action to be taken following the closed session. Once the closed session has concluded, the recording will include the action taken by the board. We'll reconvene out here in open session, and we'll take the action afterwards. And the recording will include all of that action that is taken. And we are going into closed session to discuss the Illinois topics under the Illinois Open Meetings Act covered in Section 2C1. So I will entertain a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
And a roll call, please.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Carey. Dr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. Mankowski.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. session. And I move that the Kaneland Board of Education authorize Mrs. Ecker's unpaid exclusion and that it be reclassified as an unpaid suspension starting on October 12, 2021 for failure to comply with the Executive Order 2021-22. Is there a second?
Second.
And a roll call when you're ready, please.
Okay. President Witt,
Aye.
Mr. Gonzalez,
No.
Mrs. Junk,
Aye.
Mr. Carey, no. Mr. Lawler, or Dr. Lawler,
Aye.
Mr. Mankivsky,
Nay.
Mrs. Simmons,
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Motion carries 4-3.
Thank you.
And now we will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?